Yeah, hello everybody. Welcome again to my video blog Questions of Doubt in Corporate Valuation. And our today's question of doubt again relates to debt policies in corporate valuation. We already have touched this topic in our last QOD videos, but the reason why I picked this up again is that my impression is that in practice not too many people really care about the importance of this debt policy. So in that sense, that begs the question of today, the question of doubt of today, do I really need to care about a debt policy in DCF valuation? Yeah. So let's start with a small and fast recap. What is a debt policy in DCF valuation? Well, the idea is that a debt policy consists out of two components that relate to the debt financing of the firm to be valued. And the first is, of course, the leverage ratio. That is the ratio of debt to total firm value or enterprise value. And the second important component of such a debt policy is the time to maturity or the refinance sequence in years. Yeah. So the two factors are combined in the following way. That is, you start and give a certain target leverage ratio that is supposed to be constant to infinity in the future. And you give a certain refinancing sequence of K years. Yeah. And the idea is then that as, of course, the future cash flow development and the future firm value development is uncertain, that after K years, you then adjust the level of debt by multiplying the then prevailing firm value with your constant leverage ratio, and then adjust the debt level towards these target debt level. Yeah? So in that sense, these two components, that is this refinancing sequence K and the leverage ratio, have an important impact on two factors. The first is, of course, the tax shields, and the present value of the tax savings depends on this debt financing policy. And of course, as we'll touch in one of our later QOD videos, the bankruptcy probability also depends and is affected by this debt policy. We also have shown so far in our last videos that the general model contains the well-known debt policies that are currently applied in practice as special cases. If we let this refinancing sequence K converge to infinity, then the debt level is constant and to infinity, and it is independent from the future firm value. Then we arrive at this Modigliani-Miller policy. If we assume a Miles-Etzel policy, then this is equivalent to say that K is equal to 1, that the debt level is adjusted annually. That is, every year the debt level is adjusted towards this target debt level. And if we assume this Harris-Pringle policy, then K is converging against 0 or is going towards 0. Then the debt level is adjusted instantaneously. That is, every tiny change and incremental change of the firm value is followed by an immediate adjustment of the level of debt. Okay, so here is the graphical representation of this again. So you see here that in both of these graphs, our future firm value is a random variable and goes up and down. It follows a certain stochastic process. And now we have the two special cases, the MM debt policy where K goes to infinity. And you see here that the leverage ratio is 50%. That means that the debt level, the current debt level is 50, and you see it's completely independent from wherever the firm value is going to move. Whereas here our Miles-Etzel debt policy, that is every year the debt level is adjusted according to the current target leverage ratio times the then prevailing firm value. Then you see after 1 year, our firm value has been dropped by Y%, and that means that our debt level is also adjusted downwards by Y%, yeah, because the leverage ratio still is supposed to be constant to 0.5. So in that sense, you may say that our Miles-Etzel debt policy, which implies an annual adjustment of the debt level, is then tracing the development of the firm value with a lag of 1 year. Yeah. So another question: do I really have to make an assumption about the firm's debt policy? Yeah, because as I said, my impression is that in practice, people do not care too much about this question. Yeah? So it's obvious if we assume and if we use the APV, adjusted present value approach, that we need to make an assumption about the firm's debt policy, because here, when valuing the tax shield and calculating the tax shield as the present value of the debt-related tax savings, you need to choose an assumption about the debt policy, yeah? Because we get different equations for different debt policies. Yeah? So in that sense, there is no way to escape this assumption if we work with an APV model. On the other hand, working with a standard WACC approach, which is in that sense more widespread in use in practice, on first glance you don't seem to have to choose an assumption, yeah? Because the components of the WACC that you need for the cost of capital, the cost of debt, the cost of equity, and the weights of debt according to your target capital structure do at least not directly seem to depend on a given debt policy. Yeah? But if we take a closer look, then you will see that this is actually not the case, because the debt policy that we assume has an impact on our relevering and delevering equations for our beta factor. Yeah? So the reason for this is that the debt policy drives the risk of the tax savings, and by doing so affects the link between the unlevered and the levered beta and the famous beta adjustment equation, and of course by doing so also affects the cost of equity. Yeah? So the thing is then that this well-known equation that everybody uses, or most of the practitioners uses, when adjusting the beta for different leverages or delevering industry betas and then relevering the betas for the target company, this famous Hamada equation, as it is called, assumes and is only working if we assume our Modigliani-Miller case with k going to infinity. Yeah? So that means that this equation is only working if the firm follows an MM debt policy with a constant debt level to infinity. Second, it assumes that debt is riskless, as you can see, because the debt beta is not showing up in this equation, so it is set equal to 0. And the third assumption is that the future cash flows are perpetuity. Only in these cases you are allowed to use this beta adjustment equation. Yeah? And that is, if we assume other refinancing sequences or other debt policies, then we require different equations for the relevering and the delevering link between the unlevered beta and the levered betas. We will show in our next QOD video how these links then look and how they depend on our assumption about the debt policy and on our choice of K. So summing up, I do think that only in rare occasions you will not need to make an assumption about the debt policy. Yeah? And this is the case if, in that sense, the cost of equity and the beta of the firm are directly observable and they are constant. So there is no need to change them, and there is thus no need to use an equation like this. Yeah? So if you derive the beta out of observable capital market data, and if you do not intend to change the capital structure of the firm, then of course you can use the levered beta of the firm. It does not have to be derived from the industry or from peer groups. You can directly use it without this de- and relevering procedure. And the second thing is then if the firm's current capital structure is equal to the target capital structure, then there is also no need to change the beta of the firm. So in that sense, the beta is supposed to stay constant to infinity, and the cost of equity is also supposed to stay constant to infinity. Then there is no need to fix a debt policy. Yeah? But in that sense, you do not have to make an assumption about the debt policy. But on the other hand, still the financing policy of a firm is an important value driver. So even though if you are happy with your beta and if you are happy with your current capital structure, it is still a wise idea to think about the debt policy of a firm, because it will affect the financing structure, and the financing strategy will affect the value of the company. Yeah? So even though if there is no need to use the D and relevering procedure or to adjust the beta factor, still it is a wise idea to make yourself ahead about the best financing strategy for the firm to be valued. Yeah? Because, of course, you value the firm given the optimal financing structure and the optimal debt policy, and that, of course, requires you to make yourself ahead about this. So that's it for today. Thank you.